Hi, boys and girls. I'm back with Efren Divided, and we only got a little bit up to page 23 in this book, and I'm going to read some more. This boy is concerned that, his parents could be deported. So here we are on page 24. Efren and David raced to their first class after the ASB meeting ended. Mr. Garrett was not someone to mess with. Rumor had it that he was the only teacher at school to ever send an entire classroom to the principal's office, all at one time. The strange thing about Mr. Garrett was that he wasn't always like this. Last year, during the 6th grade Renaissance Assembly, the principal, Mrs. Carey, introduced him as the district's Teacher of the Year. Mr. Garrett ran up to the stage, high-fiving kids on his way. Everyone in the gymnasium stood and cheered. Mr. Garrett was all smiles that day and seemed like a totally different person. Since Mr. Garrett taught only honors of history, Efren knew he'd be having him the following year. Efren couldn't wait. Only something happened to him. It was as if a gray cloud swept down and planted itself right over Mr. Garrett's classroom and never left. He just didn't look happy anymore. Efren entered the classroom first. Unlike others around the school, their room stood bare without any cheesy history teacher posters or bright bulletin boards highlighting student learning. Not here, nada. Even Mr. Garrett's desk was bare, just the usual oversized mug of Starbucks coffee. Not waiting for the bell, Efren began copying down the homework. Article of the day, same as yesterday. Everyone opened their assigned Chromebooks and began logging in. Mr. Garrett took his usual seat behind his desk. You all know the drill. Work on the typing tutorial if you finish early. And with that, he went back to the same book of Sudoku puzzles from a week ago. Just as Efren positioned his fingers across the keyboard, a crumpled sheet of paper struck the back of his head. There was no need to look around or track the path it came from. This was just the way David preferred to communicate during class. Efren spread the paper across the desk, ironing it out as best as he could. This particular note was an illustration, or master pizza, as David liked to call them. The artwork on the page showed Mr. Garrett slumped over his desk with his face soaking in a pool of drool. A stick figure girl stood behind him with her fingers resting inside her triangle nose. The speech bubble above her head said, "You forgot to sign his homework." It could only be one girl, Jennifer Huerta, David's new political enemy. Efren pressed down on his temples and buried the drawing under his Chromebook. He then turned back and shook his head at wide-grinning David. As much as he loved hanging around with David, Efren chose to spend his morning nutrition breaks at his favorite place at school, the library. Like his bathtub at home, it was a place where he could open a book and let himself be taken anywhere he wanted. Here, Efren felt free. Here, there was never anyone he needed to bathe or help with homework. Here, he didn't have to take on security watch and sit by his apartment window at night waiting for Amma to make it home safely from work. Here, it was all about his escaping into other worlds where everything usually ends in smiles. Efren unzipped his backpack and took out the books he'd tucked away at the bottom. He then slipped them into the weathered, empty Amazon box marked Return, seated outside the library door. He stepped inside and greeted Mrs. Ornelas, the only school librarian in the entire world with a habit of talking louder than the students. She looked up from her messy desk and waved with a smile. Of course, Efren smiled back as he headed toward the fiction area. Second row, top shelf, the same exact spot he left off the last time he was here. Without missing a beat, he began running his fingers along the spines of each book until something called to him, and something always did. This time, his fingers paused over a teal book with orange letters. Oh, I love this book. That's just me talking. The House on Mango Street? He thought about Highland Street, about the fruit trees, and for a split second wondered if this book might somehow be about his own neighborhood. He pictured little kids in diapers chasing chickens, running around freely, while slightly older kids played school on the porch or made mud pies to share with the entire neighborhood. Yeah, right. Efren scoffed at the idea. That's an amazing book, a voice behind him said. It was Jennifer Huerta, the only other student who checked out as many books as Efren. She stood beside him, her long wavy hair held tightly in a braid. It's about a girl named Esperanza trying to discover who she is and where she belongs in the world. It's my favorite book ever, Jennifer said, clutching a Lord of the Rings book to her chest. Efren's eyes went wide. Really? Yeah, the girl in it sounds a lot like me. She even uses Spanglish once in a while. Efren cringed. My 5th grade teacher, Mrs. O'Neill, used to get mad if we spoke that way in class. Why? What's it to her? Efren liked this side of Jennifer. She had a bit of attitude he hadn't seen before. I don't know. Maybe because she couldn't understand what we were saying. Jennifer's laugh surprised Efren. They'd been in the same honors class since last year, and he'd never heard her laugh before. What's your favorite book? She asked. Probably Maniac Maggie. Maniac Maggie? I haven't read that one. Yep, said Efren. It's amazing. It's about this kid stuck between 2 different worlds that don't get along because of the color of their skin. And at the end, he actually... sorry, don't want to spoil it for you. Oh, don't worry about me. I always read the endings first. Wait, what? Yeah, I like to read the endings first. That way, I know that there's a happy ending. Otherwise, the books are too suspenseful for me, and I bite my fingernails until the tips begin to hurt. And she laughed. I'll probably have to wear gloves on the school's election day. Efren's mouth decided to betray him. I'm sure you'll do great, he blurted out. Oh, thanks, Jennifer answered, a look of surprise on her face. But I don't have my hopes up too high. Well, so why are you running? Well, I was home watching a report on how undocumented families were being separated. They had kids in cages like animals, and that really hurt. She looked back at Efren. You ever buy eggs at the store? Yeah, sometimes. Amma sends me to the corner market whenever we're out. You ever notice the labels? Efren shook his head. Most of the eggs say that they come from cage-free chickens, which means people in this country worry more about chickens than they do about undocumented children. It makes me feel so... Her eyes welled up and she stopped to look around and make sure nobody else was close to her to hear her. And then, with her head down as if she was ashamed, she said, Mi mama no tiene papeles. Don't worry. My parents are here illegally, too. I swear I won't tell anyone. Jennifer smiled ever so slightly. I know you won't. That's why I told you. My mom says I'm a great judge of character. She says I'd make a great whoop. Okay, I don't know how to pronounce that. Wes? Someday, and I'll have my own courtroom. She reached into her backpack and held out a brown paper lunch bag. The words Somos Semilletas was neatly written across the front. We are seeds? I don't get it. It's a Mexican saying. Oh no, I'm going to really mess that up. Nos quieren enterrar, pero no sabían que éramos semillas? I, Mrs. P, am so sorry that I probably brutalized that sentence. Anyway, Efren rubbed his lower lip. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. That's kind of an awesome saying, don't you think? Yeah, that's it. My mom likes to remind me of this every day. And she's right, though. That's why I'm running. Figured I could make a difference, even if just at school. Efren's smile widened. I like it. I think your mom is right. You'd make a great politician. She laughed. Well, I think you'd make a great school president. Efren's cheeks turned bright red. Thanks, but I'm just campaigning for David. Too bad. Losing wouldn't hurt as much if it were against someone like you. Again, Efren's mouth continued on autopilot. I think you'd make a great president. And immediately he covered his mouth with his hand. Jennifer smiled and pulled her bright pink rolling backpack in close to her. I better go, she said. Han is waiting for me. but before leaving, she leaned in and gave him a quick hug before vanishing behind the next aisle. Efren directed his gleaming eyes back at the book in his hand. His ears perked up. We didn't always live on Mango Street. He lined up against the shelf and began reading the first page. Jennifer was right. This book was different. Efren thought about all the different neighborhoods he'd lived in. There had been a lot, but Highland Street had eventually become his home, just like he imagined Mango Street had been for the girl telling the story. He read on. But even so, it's not the house we thought we'd get. He'd heard Appa say this very same thing many times. Efren closed the book. He'd hit the jackpot today. There was no need to keep on searching. Efren looked at the time. Nutrition break was almost over, and he headed to the checkout desk where Mrs. Ornelas sat with her big jug of coffee beside her as she repaired a torn page from a graphic novel. Hi, Mrs. Ornelas. Oh, Efren, how's my #1 reader? Efren shrugged. Pretty good, he answered. He held up this book. I'd like to check out this book. She looked up. Just one? Yeah, just one today. At lunchtime, Efren's friends picked at their food, tossing out anything they couldn't coat with Italian chili powder. After that, Efren and Abraham jostled for a better position to watch David showing off his skills on his new Nintendo Switch, which he'd gotten a month ago for his birthday. Both boys cringed with every strike from Charizard, as if it were them dueling it out. If only Appa's boss had come through with the bonus he'd promised him for finishing a recent construction job early. Then he would have been able to keep his promise and buy Efren his own device. That dream, however, burst along with Appa's appendix. Not only did the bonus not happen, he also got fired from that job after taking too long to heal. There was still a scar on his lower abdomen that Appa liked to call his zipper. Claimed it was where he kept his wallet and his keys. Efren sat and watched as David climbed yet another victory. Don't worry, guys, said David. When I become school president, I'm going to return the Chromebooks they assign us and buy switches for everyone instead. Abraham turned and raised his hand high in the air. Efren high-fived him back. Like it could really be that easy, he thought. David shut the game off and slipped his device back. We're going to stop here in a second. Back into his backpack. You guys want to help me after school? Help with what? Asked Abraham, picking at a scab on his elbow. Make posters and flyers for the election. Sorry, I've got soccer practice. Our coach makes us run laps if we're late, said Abraham. David's goofy grin vanished. Come on, how about you, Efren? Well, since I did walk to school alone, I'm guessing it's all right if I stay late and walk home alone too. But I better leave my mom a message. Can I borrow your phone? David's grin reappeared as he handed over his phone. Great, we'll start with the bathroom posters. Efren and Abraham turned to each other. Bathroom? They asked in perfect sync. Can you guys think of a better place? He raised his arms as if he was spreading out an invisible set of plans. I was thinking of placing one in each stall, maybe even in over the urinals. Efren closed his eyes and laughed. An hour and a half later, after leaving a message for Amma, he and David were up to their elbows in paint. Okay, we're going to stop right here on page 35, and we'll come back to it next week. Bye.